The economic impact of our facility on the state as a whole is well over $5 billion a year. Our facility represents about 20% of the gross domestic product of the Montgomery area.
EVs are more powerful, more practical, and more cost-effective than you think. And they're also driving economic growth in Alabama. In these episodes, we're talking to some of the brightest leaders in the industry. And we're covering everything from infrastructure advancements to benefits and incentives for people like you. Hello. Thank you for joining us for the Drive Electric Alabama podcast, where we plug you in to everything you need to know about electric vehicles, also known as EVs, in the state of Alabama. This podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV incentive programs. To learn more about these programs, go to alabamapower.com/EV. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Staley. I'm also president of the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. In previous episodes, we've talked about the wide range of funding and all the resources that are out there to support EV adopters and the infrastructure needs and how those are being met. Today, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about another topic that I love, which is electric vehicle production. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, there's like 84 EVs that are on the market available now and 21 plug-in hybrids. Automakers are designing and adding EVs to their lineups left and right. And we have this report of $600 billion, and that's billion with a B, $600 billion committed to be invested by automakers to build new production lines, develop new technology, battery production, facilities, raw materials they need, and it all points towards an electric future for vehicles. Those investments make it clear. A lot of that activity is happening in Alabama, and Hyundai is a great example where they're producing the Genesis Electrified GV70 in Montgomery. Joining us today is Robert Burns, Chief Administrative Officer and Vice President of Hyundai Motor Manufacturing of Alabama, which we sometimes refer to as HMMA. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Thank you, Michael. Glad to join you and talk about the electric vehicles that the Hyundai and Genesis lineup has.
Well, let's get right to it. And so, Robert, I'd like to ask you, just to give the listeners an overview, tell us about yourself and a little bit about your role as Chief Administrative Officer and Vice President of HMMA. Is that right? Is that how we refer to it?
Yes, we very commonly refer to Hyundai Motor Manufacturing Alabama as HMMA. Yes, I'm as you said, the Chief Administrative Officer, Vice President. I've been at the company almost 19 years now, and so I've seen the evolution of our brand and the vehicles that we make. And it's just been an amazing journey here, and we're really excited, as we're about to talk about today, having electric vehicles on our assembly line for the U.S. market.
And so can you give me a little bit, a high-level overview there? You're making EVs, they're on the assembly line. How many cars is that being produced a year right now in Montgomery?
So currently our production plan is around 360,000 units per year. And on the Genesis brand for the electrified GV70, we're projecting between 3,000 and 4,000 units per year right now on that particular vehicle. The balance of the production goes across the Santa Cruz sport utility vehicle, the Tucson sport utility vehicle, the Santa Fe sport utility vehicle as well, and then the Genesis with the internal combustion engine, that GV70 that has an internal combustion engine.
It sounds like you've added the EV capacity in Montgomery, and then you can scale that up over time. Is that the way it works?
Yes. So what we've done is we've invested $300 million to prepare for that vehicle, and it launched in February of last year. And so we have the ability, as you just said, to scale up. The interesting thing for us as an automotive manufacturer for the electric vehicle is the electrified GV70 is assembled on the same line with all of our other vehicles. Now, once the car is complete and it has a I'll just say a typical automotive battery in it to power up all the lights and the electronics. It will be moved off the line, and then the main battery source for the vehicle will be installed separately offline. And so that is just a little twist for us for the time being. But as we move forward, we'll invest additional dollars to be able to make that more of a seamless process in our assembly line. But that's probably about 2 years out.
So it's definitely required some adaptations of your facility, but also of the team. So can you tell me a little bit about how the manufacturing process has impacted them and what they do when they come to work every day?
It's been twofold with specifically the Electrified GV70 and the Genesis brand itself. The team members had to think in terms of a different level of a quality mindset. Now, granted, we build quality cars every day with the Hyundai brand, absolutely. But the Genesis consumer has a higher expectation. So the attention to detail, because the luxury is in the details, as we like to say. And so helping those team members understand that customer expectation was part one. But once we started the pre-production builds and getting into full production of the Electrified GV70, it was learning, the fit and finish process. But how do we assemble this car with this essentially a 1,000-pound battery that's going to be attached to the vehicle at the back end of the process by team members through a lift station, and them understanding how that system works. Because now you're plugging in not an engine, you're plugging in a battery. And what do you need to do to prepare that battery to talk to the electronics of an electric vehicle? So there's training related to that. And then also setting up literally the cooling system. And EV drivers certainly know what I mean about a cooling system requirement for an electric vehicle, because during the charging process, the battery will warm up and it's continuing to charge, but there's literally a cooling system inside the battery pack itself to be able to maintain a certain temperature level for that battery while it's charging. So that was another learning aspect for our team members.
So does that really amount to growth of existing team members in many cases? And then I guess you're adding on some new people, but generally the existing team members are able to upskill and really participate in this production line as well?
Yes, what was very interesting for us as we, again, started to build the Genesis brand, yes, the Electrified GV70 and the ICE version of the GV70, we ended up creating a dedicated team. We literally call it the Genesis team that would follow the vehicle along the assembly line to assist any team members with the build process. Again, focused on quality, consistency of build. So by having this dedicated team, which yes, translated into more jobs, it helped us to effectively launch this vehicle in the U.S. market.
Well, I want to talk for a second about the tremendous growth in the Montgomery area that's occurred around your company, around HMMA. In a future episode, we're going to have Secretary Ellen McNair of the Alabama Department of Commerce. She was at the Montgomery Chamber during the time of this growth of Montgomery's economy. And I know she's planning to talk about her experience seeing growth in the EV and the automotive manufacturing sector based on what Hyundai's done in Montgomery when she was at the Chamber of Commerce. And now she's the Secretary of Commerce for the whole state, and she's got a plan for growth. How have you experienced that? Because you've been there the whole time and you've seen so much change. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I guess one way we put it in context is, as I said, 19 years now with the company. And when I came on board back in March, April 2007, there was maybe 2,200 team members at that time. And we had a two-shift operation building two vehicles. And it was actually the Santa Fe and the Sonata at that time. And then you fast forward to 2024. Now we have 4,000 full-time team members, a payroll that exceeds $400 million a year. And now we have 5 different vehicles on the same assembly line that only had 2 back in 2007. And it's all SUV now. The market has changed. Yes, including the electric SUV, but still the market has changed dramatically in all that time. So that's what it's meant for the community. When I say the $400 million, the 4,000 people that are employed, the economic impact of our facility on the state as a whole is well over $5 billion a year. And the local impact is that our facility represents about 20% of the gross domestic product of the Montgomery area. So it's huge, and it's like 17,000 additional direct and indirect jobs in the Montgomery area, about 17,000.
It's just incredible. So are there any, in terms of the skills of the manufacturing workers, and we've kind of talked about this already, but was there anything where it was kind of a surprise or, hey, we really don't have this covered and this is an area that we've got to get into in order to make an EV here?
Another element of the training related to the battery specifically. When a team member works on a vehicle that has an internal combustion engine, you might do things like disconnect the battery cable on the battery, and maybe you'll pull some hoses off and things like that. Well, now with an electric vehicle, you have to think in terms of industrial maintenance, in that you have to lock out, tag out the car. And people with an industrial background probably heard the word lockout, tag out. You want to make the vehicle a zero energy state, because this battery is charged, and it is a charged battery that has a lot of electricity, a lot of power behind it. And if the team member doesn't follow procedures related to lockout, tag out, it could be a dangerous situation. So we had some extensive training for those team members who would troubleshoot any of these cars to be able to do that safely, and of course be able to find the issues through a diagnostic process. But that learning curve associated with an electric vehicle, because they've never built one at HMMA before.
The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's Home Charging Rebate Program. You can get a $500 rebate when you purchase and install a Level 2 charger at your home. If you want to know more, check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Now back to the discussion. So, Robert, we've talked a lot about how Hyundai puts an emphasis on the quality of the build of your product for customers, and also how you value your team members, their safety, their training, and your process. Along with EVs comes a whole nother area that may be new, and I'd like to know what your experience has been or what you're looking at from a range anxiety perspective. And you build a great quality product. How do you bridge that gap for your customers to feel confident about this range anxiety?
Well, there's been two different attacks related to customer experience and, yes, the range anxiety concerns that they may have. So Electrify America is who Hyundai has a partnership with relative to our Ioniq brand. The Ioniq brand under Hyundai is our electric vehicle brand, with the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6. Hyundai created what is now branded as Hyundai Home, and Hyundai Home is a online marketplace to assist the owner with creating their EV charging infrastructure at their home. It could be as simple as a level 2 charger in their garage, but it could go even as far as solar panels on their roof to support the EV charging station itself at their home. And there's literally a website for the consumer to go and get a free cost estimate and a one-stop shop for them to set up that EV charging capability at their home. So that's the one aspect of the range anxiety for the consumer that has the vehicle and wants to understand what their options will be. The second part is Hyundai and 7 other OEMs have gone together with a consortium to set up to 30,000 additional electric charging stations across North America beginning summer of 2024 and through the next 5 years. Those other OEMs, I have no problem saying BMW, GM, Honda, Kia, Mercedes, Stellantis, they've all come together with this goal in mind of creating this charging network to support the consumers that are ready to make that transition to an electric vehicle. And those charging stations will have the combined charging system infrastructure or even the North American charging system plugins. So no matter which type of plug you have, you're going to be good to go with these charging stations.
So for the listeners, to sum that up, if you buy a Hyundai Ioniq or a Genesis Electrified, you're going to have a host of options from Hyundai that can help you identify home charging infrastructure needs and fill those needs. And then also you're building this national network with a consortium. And you said that would have the CCS1 and the NACS connectors. So that would be meeting all the needs of all EVs, right? So that charging network wouldn't just be for your customers. Obviously, if you're in a consortium, it would be for like all EVs or what?
Yeah, that's correct. And definitely will be set up each of these charging stations. You already said it. They will have the combined charging system or CCS connector or the North American charging or NACS connectors. Doesn't matter which brand that you're driving. You'll be able to go to these venues and be able to charge your car. And they'll all be level 3 because most of the OEMs, and you may already know this, and maybe the listeners already know this, 400 or 800 volt capacity, which 800 volts has a higher charging speed versus 400 volt, but definitely all level 3s at these particular venues. And they're going to be basically integrated into a area, maybe like a rest area, or it might be a food service venue or a retail operation or some other destination to make that a more pleasant experience for the consumer who's wanting to charge their car and ease of access, whether it is someone who's traveling the highway on a longer trip or someone who's just bouncing around town and they're at a venue that has these chargers and they can charge while they're going in the grocery store or whatever it may be.
Well, that's great because the more chargers we get out there, the easier it is for people to adopt. And I know that when we have events that bring together lots of different EV owners, the Ioniq owners always talk about how fast the car charges when they go to a fast charger. So that convenience of fast charging, it really does make a difference. And we hear it all the time. So I'd like to talk about one more topic and any others you want, but I wanted to ask you, safety of EVs is also something that gets talked about a lot, and especially, I think, fire and emergency response type situations. So what has Hyundai been doing to address or help equip first responders with knowledge and what they need? What's going on in that field?
In 2023, we had conversations with the Montgomery Fire Department about how we could help them as they prepare for electric vehicles in the Montgomery area. And the way that we did that, we work with an outside vendor called BEST, B-E-S-T, with a fire suppression system that is designed specifically for an electric vehicle. Yes, there is a risk of a battery fire if someone gets into an accident or what have you. These BEST fire suppression systems cost about $75,000. And so we essentially donated 2 of those systems to the Montgomery Fire Department. And these units literally go underneath the car. They're hooked up to the fire engine's water supply. And then through a hydraulic process, they punch a hole in the battery and start flooding the interior of the battery with water. And that helps keep the temperature level down and then eventually be able to put in a situation where the vehicle can be safely transported away from wherever the issue may be, the accident or what have you.
Well, the first responder training is something we know is needed as there's, more cars on the road and there's lots of training. And I know that the Alabama Fire College is even looking at ways to make sure that, all first responders, second responders, even and third responders are aware of how to work with EVs just because they're new. You've really explained how Hyundai's involved really from the very beginning to the end of the process here by supporting the manufacturing and then the customers and then the safety, both in your facilities and out on the road. So thank you for that, and thank you for your leadership. And we're very glad that we have Hyundai in Alabama contributing to our state being one of the top 5 auto producing states in the country. Now it's time for a segment where we separate fact from fiction when it comes to EVs. And it's brought to you by the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. There's a myth out there that says EVs are more expensive than gas-powered vehicles. But the truth is, the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the EV can be less than that of a gasoline-powered vehicle. With EVs, the savings come from lower fuel and maintenance costs, including an estimated savings of $45 per refuel and no oil changes. In addition, when you purchase an EV, you may qualify for up to $7,500 in federal tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Robert, I really appreciate that you've taken the time to talk with us today and to help us understand what Hyundai's doing in Montgomery and across our whole state for safety and for contributing to our state being a top auto producing state. It's just great to have you here. And I'd like to let our listeners leave with just a few key takeaways from you, if you don't mind. How would you sum this all up?
Well, the way I would sum this up is that we're in this transition mode to electric vehicle adoption across the country. It's going to take time. It's going to need the infrastructure we've already talked about. It's going to need to see an evolution for the consumer that creates an even better experience for them. I mean, it's already very good with the Genesis brand, the Ioniq brand, but it's got to continue to evolve is the best way I can put it. And what's great for us at our facility is that Mobus, Alabama is a tier 1 supplier that builds parts for a variety of vehicles for HMMA, and they've invested over $200 million to create a battery subsystem assembly operation to support Hyundai's electric vehicle production and the Kia Georgia electric vehicle production. And so we are investing in electric vehicles. We see that that is the future as a company. And we believe that over time, the consumer will reach that point where their comfort level is high, the sales will meet the expectations we have out there, and that's just going to be great for everybody and the economy, the environment, et cetera. So I think it's just a bright future, and we're looking forward to having a very strong position for our brands, Hyundai and Genesis, in the electric vehicle segment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about EV-related workforce development. I'll be speaking with 2 experts from Alabama Power, Tom McNeil, who's a workforce development program manager, and Jim Fugate, the energy infrastructure training and technical training manager. Stay tuned, and we hope to see you then. The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV programs, as well as the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. The series is co-hosted by me, Michael Staley, and Cedric Daniels, and the podcast is produced by Ingredient. For more information, you can always check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Thanks for listening.